You ever just know a team's season is doomed before it even really begins? That was the 76ers this year. So before the season even ended, I was scrolling through the 76ers subreddit, and I saw a post where fans were panicking about an upcoming brutal 4-game stretch. Now, when I say brutal, you're probably thinking something like Bucks, Celtics, Nuggets, Warriors, right?
No.
They were stressed about playing the Pelicans, Wizards, Heat, and Raptors. That was the scary stretch. That tells you everything you need to know. Philly fans had mentally checked out. They weren't even watching the games hoping for wins anymore. They were hoping for losses so they could keep their top 6 protected pick. When you care more about ping-pong balls than playoff seeding halfway through the season, it's rough out here. And listen, as a Pelicans fan, I gotta give them props. Holding on to that pick is actually a massive win. Because if the 76ers fell out of the top 6, that pick would go straight to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let me say that again, the pick would go to the Thunder. You know, the team that almost won 70 games this year. The team that's already overflowing with young talent and draft picks. The last thing OKC needs is another lottery ticket. Imagine giving a stack of cash to someone who's already rich and saying, "Go ahead, buddy, make another investment." Oklahoma City fans, I'm sorry, but on behalf of every other NBA fanbase, we're begging the basketball gods, please, don't let that pick convey. But seriously, this whole situation with Philly? It's not just about bad luck or a tough stretch. It's been a chaotic, injury-filled, disappointment-soaked mess of a season. And while there are a lot of reasons for that, we can't ignore the one name that's sitting right in the middle of this disaster. Paul George. Alright, let's talk about Paul George, because when people say the Sixers season was a disappointment, a big chunk of that disappointment was wearing number 13. When the Sixers signed Paul George, it was supposed to be a game-changer. Like, this wasn't some low-risk pickup or veteran minimum deal.
No.
This was $212 million over 4 years. Philly went all in on PG-13, no discount, no flexibility, just full-on max contract, with a fat 15% trade kicker attached for good measure. Now to be fair, they weren't asking him to be an MVP or carry the team every night. All they needed was the Paul George we saw in LA, a two-way force, efficient scorer, someone who could hold it down when Embiid inevitably missed time. Not lead the league in scoring, just be solid. Just be Paul George. And what did they get instead? A player who looked like he was sponsored by Icy Hot. This man spent the entire season battling nagging injuries, missing time, and even when he was on the court, the numbers weren't great. He averaged 16.2 points on 43% shooting, and for $212 million? That's tough. You know what it felt like? It felt like buying a brand new iPhone, full price, right before the new model drops, and then realizing the one you bought doesn't even hold a charge. Sure, it's still got the name, the brand, the potential. But let's be real, you overpaid. And then, in true Philly fashion, things got even worse. After a brutal 32-point loss to the Bulls, Paul George went full motivational speaker. He said, "We've shown no sign of a team that will compete. We just don't have the habits of a champion or a playoff contending team." Cool speech, PG. The problem? That quote came in February. The Sixers were already toast. Like, burnt crust, throw it out level toast. A week later, Paul George announced he was taking a break from podcasting to focus on winning a championship. Respect the hustle, but bro, that ship already left the harbor. By March, reports started leaking that the Sixers would look to trade Paul George this summer. And I get it, they're desperate to pivot. But, good luck. That contract is looking like a concrete block tied to this franchise's ankle. Then, March 17th hits. The Sixers announce Paul George will miss the rest of the season with injuries to his adductor muscle and knee. And the irony is wild here, because suddenly everyone starts saying, well, maybe he wasn't healthy the whole year, maybe we shouldn't judge him too harshly. But hold on. That's the exact problem. They paid for health, for reliability, for a star who could help carry the load when Embiid or Maxey went down. Instead, they got exactly what they didn't want, an aging, expensive, inconsistent player with durability issues. And while all this is going on, James Harden, the guy Daryl Morey refused to pay, is out there doing vintage Harden things every single night. Crossing people up, dropping dimes, finishing through contact, just putting on a show. It's a brutal contrast. One guy you didn't want to pay is balling out for another team. The guy you did pay, he's in street clothes, racking up DNPs and podcast quotes. And trust me, this isn't even rock bottom for Paul George yet. Alright, so while Paul George was out here struggling to stay healthy and putting up mid-numbers, someone else on the Sixers was quietly turning heads. And no, it wasn't Embiid or Maxey. It was Quentin Grimes. Yeah, that Quentin Grimes. The mid-season pickup nobody paid much attention to. While PG-13 was raking in $212 million, this guy was making $4 million, and somehow managed to become the most exciting player in a Sixers uniform down the stretch. Since coming to Philly, Grimes averaged 22.4 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 4.6 assists. Solid numbers, right? But here's the kicker. He wasn't just out there chucking shots on a bad team. He was efficient. We're talking 47.7% from the field and 38.9% from three. That's not volume shooting. That's legit production. Grimes wasn't just filling up the stat sheet. He was playing like someone who actually gave a damn, bringing energy, hustle, and defense every single night. Need proof? Just look at his game against the Rockets. Dude dropped 46 points and hit 8 out of 14 from deep. He had the Houston broadcast team acting like they were watching prime Kobe. They literally said, "He's played as well as Kevin Durant, LeBron James." This is one of the best performances Houston's seen all season. And that wasn't even hyperbole. The only player who dropped more in Houston this season was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with 51, and he's in the MVP convo. So let me get this straight. Grimes, the quiet mid-season trade piece, is putting up all-star level stat lines, locking up on defense, playing with passion, and earning national praise. Meanwhile, Paul George is racking up DNPs, losing his defensive edge, and basically turning into a very expensive ghost. It's almost poetic. And let's not forget, this isn't a rookie we're hyping up. Grimes is a guy who was largely overlooked, passed around, and came into Philly with zero pressure. He didn't come in demanding headlines. He came in with his head down and just hooped. That's what makes this sting even more for the Sixers. Because when fans and analysts look at this team now, they're not asking, how do we build around Paul George? They're asking, how do we get out of that Paul George contract? They're talking about Quentin Grimes like he's the future. They're excited about him. Let that sink in. You're paying $212 million for PG-13 to give you 16 points and sit on the bench, while a $4 million mid-season trade is putting up 46 on the Rockets, getting love from national media, and making people forget Paul George even exists. And no shade to Grimes, he's earned it. But from a team-building perspective, that's a disaster. This was the praise Philly thought they were buying with PG's contract. This was the energy they thought he'd bring. Instead, they're stuck with a contract they can't move, a player they can't rely on, and a role player who accidentally became a franchise cornerstone just by doing his job better than the guy who was supposed to be the superstar. But the Grimes breakout was only part of the problem. Because as much as Philly fans want to believe this can still be salvaged, the truth is, they might be stuck. For real. So by now, it's obvious, Paul George didn't live up to the hype in Philly. But it's not just about his poor performance, or even the injuries. It's about the contract, and how it might be the single biggest weight dragging this franchise down. Let's break it down. Philly gave Paul George $212 million over 4 years. That's over $50 million a year, and oh yeah, there's a 15% trade kicker attached. Which means, even if you could find a team willing to take him, it's going to cost even more just to move him. Now ask yourself, what team in their right mind is going to take that on? Who's looking at Paul George, a player who's declining, inconsistent, often injured, and saying, yep, that's our guy. Let's throw half the salary cap at him? Nobody. The Sixers are stuck. This contract is basically an anchor tied to the leg of a franchise trying to swim to relevance. And what makes this even more painful is that the Clippers saw this coming and got out just in time. Let me take you back to the summer. The Clippers reportedly offered PG a deal, 3 years, $150 million. Solid money, good length, fair value. But George said nah. He wanted the max. He wanted 4 years, full bag, no trade clause. All in. And the Clippers, to their credit, they didn't blink. They said no. Think about that. This is the same Clippers team that traded away everything to get Paul George in the first place. They mortgaged their future, gave up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, picks, swaps, just to land him. They were fully invested. And yet, they still walked away. Because they didn't fall for the trap. The sunk cost fallacy. You know, that thing where you keep throwing money or energy into something just because you already spent so much on it, even when it's clearly not working anymore. NBA teams fall into that hole all the time. But the Clippers didn't. Instead of clinging to a fading version of PG-13, they reinvested. They put that money toward building around James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, and solid depth. And now, they look dangerous. Meanwhile, back in Philly, they're holding a grenade with a pin already pulled. And if you're thinking, well, maybe the Sixers will just ride it out and make it work, think again, because Daryl Morey, the guy who built this team, is out here promising things that nobody believes anymore. Remember what he said. I expect our core to be back next season. That includes Paul George. Really, Daryl? This is the same guy James Harden called a liar, twice. On video. In public. At an Adidas event in China. Let me say it again. Daryl Morey is a liar. And I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. When your own superstar calls you a liar in front of an international crowd, your credibility is done. So now we've got an unstoppable force, Paul George's bloated contract, meeting an immovable object, Daryl Morey's broken promises. What wins in that matchup? Neither. They just cancel each other out. And the real losers? 76ers fans. They've watched their championship hopes dissolve into injury reports, front office chaos, and watching ex-Sixers thrive elsewhere while Philly clings to aging contracts and false hope. Meanwhile, the Clippers are probably sitting back with popcorn, thankful that PG got greedy and turned down their very reasonable offer. If he had stayed in LA with that kind of money, the Clippers might have been the ones stuck right now. And who knows, maybe the Steph Curry era in Golden State ends in disaster because they were rumored to be sniffing around Paul George too. Instead, Philly took the bait. And now they're stuck holding a $212 million regret. So yeah, Paul George isn't just a disappointment in Philly. He's a cautionary tale. And unless something drastic changes, he might go down as one of the worst signings in Sixers history.